Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. This is Enrique Lamadrid, and I am the author of Juan the Bear and the Water of Life. And it has a Spanish title because it's a bilingual book, and the Spanish title is La Acequia de Juan del Oso. So you can tell what the book is about because it's about water, the water of life. And the book is set in the valley of Mora, New Mexico. It's in northern New Mexico. And the author, well, I'm the author. The other author is Estevan Arellano, and he was from Embudo, New Mexico. And all of the people who settled in Mora, a lot of them came from Embudo. And they said, well, Embudo's kind of a small place. We need more room. We need more room. And then after the wars with the Comanche people ended, people started going up over the mountain pass, and they started coming down into Mora. And they said, what a great place to live now that it's safe. And the only problem is there wasn't very much water, and they couldn't grow hardly any crops. And so they had to get their water from the other side of the mountain. And this is a story of how they did that. Estevan Arellano tells it from the Embudo side. And I was born in Embudo. I never got to live there except a couple of summers. One of the students this morning said, you really love Mora, don't you? And I said, Mora is so beautiful. Northern New Mexico is so beautiful. I was born in northern New Mexico, but I just got to live in Santa Fe a little bit, and then the rest of the time down here in Burque. Have you ever been to Burque? Albuquerque, right? So I love El Norte. And I never got to live in Mora, but I spent 2 summers there. I never got to live in Embudo, but I spent a couple of summers there as well. So let me start the book. The legend of the Acequias of Juan del Oso. Here's where it starts. En los tiempos de Yupa, that's where we start stories in Spanish. That's like saying a long, long time ago, back in the days of Yupa. En los tiempos de Yupa, a long time ago, a man named Juan Serreño and his daughter Silvia lived in their fuertecito, which is a little mud-plastered log house, like the one you see in the picture that Amy Cordova did. Amy Cordova is from Taos. She went to Mora to teach a lot. She spent summers in Mora too, and she went to Mora to make these drawings for the book. So they made their little house high up on the northeast slope of La Jicarita, that mountain that you can see from Mora and from the side too. Jicarita means like a little gourd upside down, right near Los Alamitos, the little aspen trees, where the great forest meets the uppermost pastures and fields of the Mora Valley. They had moved over the mountain from the pueblo of Picuris after an epidemic took Silvia's mom. So unfortunately, epidemics come to New Mexico. Now we have a pandemic, but there used to be really bad epidemics of smallpox that would kill. They would come through every 10 years and they would take children, they would take some young people, they would take old people. They were very terrible. But after her mom dies, they decide to make a new start by going up to Mora. And what do? They can't plant corn. There's not enough rain. They can't plant much at all. And so they keep sheep in their little ranchito. And they have plenty of wool. And so they have their telar and they weave the wool. So it goes, since they were newcomers, There was not really a place for them in the nearby village of Agua Negra, of Holman, because there was not quite enough water to grow everything the people needed. Only some fields of winter wheat and a few cattle. Juan cut firewood and vigas that he traded for flour, beans, and other necessities like shoes and tools. Silvia took care of a small flock of sheep that gave them wool for weaving and a little meat. All winter, she and her father wove beautiful blankets and rugs on their loom. They did well enough, but the land was too dry for many people to make a living. By the early summer, the snows were melted and gone, and the pastures dried up. So what happens? One summer when the lambs came, the girl spent every day helping the ewes and guarding against the coyotes while her father was in the forest. She loved to sing to herself and the flock of sheep in the meadow. And here's the little song that she sang, and I bet some of you maybe even know it. She sang, Flor de las flores, flor de mi amor, vente conmigo y dame tu amor. And because she'd spend all day out taking the sheep, it can get kind of boring. And so what do? You sing every song you know. What she did not notice was Oso Grande, that lingered every day at the edge of the forest, who was fascinated by her song. By accident, she discovered him asleep one day when she went after a stray lamb. His fur was so thick and beautiful that she sat down to admire him unafraid. Slowly, he opened one of his eyes and said, Cántame, cántame, sing to me, sing to me. Without thinking, she sang Flor de las Flores. He sat up and said, Más, más, more, more. Over the next few weeks, she sang for him every song she knew. She was not at all surprised that he could talk to her or that she understood what he was saying. Her friendship with Oso Grande was so amazing that she was sure that her father would never believe her if she told him. The bear spoke of his solitary life in the mountains, his comfortable cave, his deep winter sleep, his curiosity about people, and the fear of their dogs. He was so gentle and wise that she fell as much in love with him as he was already in love with her. One day he sang back to her. And here's the bear singing. Can you imagine a singing bear? Well, this is a singing bear. And that was his favorite song, of course. He said, Flor de las flores, flor de mi amor, vente conmigo, flor de mi amor, vente conmigo. And he says, come with me, come with me. And she decides to follow him. She followed him up through the forest to the great peñascos, the huge rocks that formed a rocky ridge high above the Mora Valley. Oso Grande's cave was nestled in between and had a little spring in it whose waters tumbled down the steep slopes and joined a roiling river that rushed down west through more canyons to the Rio Grande. The cave was comfortable and warm, with the bed of fir boughs below piles of soft deerskins. The view was amazing. To the east, Silvia could see the Mora Valley and the great Llano. And to the west, the Cerro Pedernal and round peaks of the Jemez volcano. She felt she could almost touch the moon, it was so close. A ella se le hacía que casi podía tocar la luna. Estaba tan cerquita. Every morning, rays of sunlight came rushing into the cave. Oso Grande sang to her and asked her what she needed. He brought her everything that she wanted: jerky, carne seca, honey, miel, capulin cherries, mushrooms, even chile, and fresh baked bread, pies, and pumpkins. There's the pumpkin that he stole at night from the hornos of the villages. He was gentle and generous with her and only asked that she never leave the safety of the cave without him. Silvia's father feared that she had become bored with her lonely life in the mountains and that she had wandered away down to Mora or even Las Vegas to see the people, the stores and the plazas she had only heard about. But he and the people of the village became suspicious with the barking of dogs in the night, the theft of loaves of bread, pumpkins, and wild prune pies, and the unmistakable tracks of a bear, or maybe even a barefooted man high up in the forest. And those are the tracks. If you can see, if it's not wet enough, some of those tracks may even seem like the tracks of a person. And they said, oh no, we better go up and get this guy. He's stealing all of our pies. That's bad. So there they go. The men and boys took their dogs. Let's see, this is a double one. They took their dogs. Is the dog there? There he is, there he is. They took their dogs, their lanzas, and their guns, and they followed the tracks up to the peñascos. They started a big fire in front of the cave and fired shots towards the entrance. They heard Oso Grande's roars and were surprised to hear the cries of Silvia. No lo maten, es manso, es bueno, she said. Don't kill him, he's tame. He's good. She ran into the arms of her father, agreed to not kill the bear if it agreed to keep its distance from the village, and it could help to scare the coyotes away at lambing time. With tears in her eyes, Silvia walked back down the mountain to her father's house. Her father said, it's time for you to come home, Silvia. We didn't know where you were. We thought maybe you were in Las Vegas, right? So she goes down back to her home. By the end of the winter, she gave birth. She gave birth. Whoops. Where is she with the little baby? She gave birth to a baby. A beautiful son. She baptized him with well water, named him Juan for his grandpa, and Del Oso for his father, Oso Grande. So what's his name? His name is Juan del Oso. Silvia and Grandpa Juan were amazed at how quickly the baby grew in size and strength. In only a few months, he was walking and talking. In the fall, Juan del Oso was sent to school with the other kids. He grew up in just a few months. He started out as a little baby, and look at him by the fall. And they sent him to school. But he had a hard time at school. He went with the other kids. Silvia told the teacher and the villagers that he was a primo, that just came to visit them from the other side of the mountain to live with them. Juan del Oso was beginning to wonder who he was, especially after he started growing really thick hair on his arms. I hope you can see the thick hair on his arms. Let me put my finger on his arms. There's just so much hair on his arms. The other kids noticed it, even though his mother dressed him with long sleeve shirts to hide it. They teased him mercilessly and pulled at his shirt and his hair. One day he took a swat at one of the boys and knocked him clear across the room, where he hit his head on the teacher's desk. Without wanting to, Juan del Oso almost killed that boy. In tears, he ran home up the valley to his house. Mama, Grandpa, ¿quién soy? He says, who am I? Who am I? When they told him the story of his father, Oso Grande, he ran away up the mountain crying. When the villagers came, Silvia and Grandpa Juan apologized and told them he had sent away so he could do no more harm to the other kids. Juan del Oso had no idea where to go or where his father was. He cried in desperation. He ripped a pine tree up by its roots and made it a gigantic walking stick. He walked for days through the forest eating piñón, berries and mushrooms, until he spotted a plume of smoke. He saw two strange young men dressed in deerskins and roasting meat. They were dancing around the fire and singing an old chant, a la run tun tun, a la run tun tun. He approached them and noticed that they were as young and as strong as he was. And there they were out in the mountains. See, back in those days, there was no jail. There was no counselors. There was a school, but if kids were having a hard time, sometimes their parents just sent them to the mountains and said, well, when you're ready, you can come back home. So that's where Juan went. He said, when he introduced himself to these kids, he said, soy Juan del Oso, he said, introducing himself. Who are you and what are you doing this far up in the mountains? I am from Los Alamitos, the valley to the east. I almost killed a boy in my village. Then this one says, yo soy Mudaceros, one of them. He said, grabbing a huge oak shovel as he spoke, my job is to move hills around. He pointed across the canyon where there was a huge fresh mound of dirt and rocks with no vegetation on it at all. Juan del Oso asked him if that was really his name. No, he says, my real name was Juan de la Peña, but I was playing on a hill. When I was playing on that hill, I started a landslide that buried my uncle's root cellar with him inside it, and they made me leave. They said, you're too dangerous, Juan, so you better go up to the Sierra till you settle down. And did you notice that all these kids are named Juan? Well, in Spanish, and in English too, all of the superheroes have the same name. They're all named Juan. This is before Spider-Man, before Superman, before all of the superheroes of today. All the heroes had the same name, Juan. In English, their name was John. And what's the nickname for John? It's Jack. It's Jack. And anyway, Jack's a big hero. Who's the guy? Who's that strong kid that fights with the giant and gets the special magic beans and climbs a beanstalk up into the sky? What's the name of that kid? Jack and the Beanstalk. What's his name in Spanish? Juan. But wait a minute. He says, uh-oh. So Grande is here. You to my story. Your job is to read to the kids. So I said, okay, Oso Grande, we'll tell your story. We'll get back to the kids. So here we are. Here's the other guy. Maybe you can see him. His name, here's what he says. He says, Yo soy Mudarrios. He was holding a large iron bar. My job is to change the course of rivers. He pointed toward the same area where a muddy stream circled around the huge mound. Juan del Oso thought this was a strange name too. And he says, no, my real name was Juan del Rio. But when I made a dam so I could go trout fishing, the dam broke and washed away some of the houses in my village. In punishment, the people drove me away. The first of the Juanes was from a town far to the north, and the other was from a village far to the west, near the Rio Grande. It seemed many strong young boys shared the name Juan, but these Juanes had gotten into so much trouble, they had been exiled from their communities. They got sent away. They had met in the mountains and worked every day on their preposterous projects. They sang their magic song to keep up. They ate sacks and sacks of esquite, or toasted corn they stole from the villages. If they had not met, their loneliness would have been unbearable. They shared their dinner and their stories with Juan del Oso. So who's this one again? His name is Mudarrios. He's the river mover. And what was the other guy's name? Este se llama Mudacerros. Mudacerros. And he loved to make landslides and roll rocks off the mountains, and watch out for these guys. They're superheroes. So anyway, the next day, Juan del Oso thanked them and left, circling and climbing further towards the rocky ridges of La Jicarita. He was drawn almost by instinct to the cave of Oso Grande, his father. The bear was tearful as he embraced his son for the first time. This is the first time that the dad, it's over here on this side. This is the first time that the dad meets his little boy. You got to remember, he's a big, strong bear, but he's a good bear. Es bueno, es manso, es bueno. And so finally, Juanito gets to meet his dad. Vente conmigo, mijito, le dice. Come with me, my little son. And they went into the marvelous cave. That night they feasted on venison, which is deer meat, wild potatoes, and capulin wine. He explained to his son his love for humans, and especially for Silvia, his human wife, who he would probably never see again. Sabía que vendrías, he tells him. He says, I know that you'd finally come and find me. I knew you would come and find me. He gave Juan del Oso a huge bear hug. He explained the reason for his exile, his promise not to bother the villages again, and his desire to help the people nonetheless. Your Grandpa Juan is a hard-working man, and I want to help him, Oso Grande growled. They spoke of the good people of the valley to the east and the future of drought and deprivation that they faced. He pointed down the canyon to the west where the spring water of the cave joined the roiling river below. He got to thinking. He said, he's talking with his son Juan del Oso. And he says, there's water for your people. If we could just get it to the other side of the mountain. Juan del Oso could barely contain the hope and emotion in his heart. This would be the way to help his family in the villages. He told his father about the youths he had met in the mountains and their amazing talents. He said, Mudacerros can dig and move the earth itself. And mudarrios can change the course of rivers. I am as strong as they are. Maybe they can help. The next day, they traveled across the canyons and forests to find the wild young men and explain their plan. When they met, they were excited to find a new purpose for their strength and skills. They all went together back to the cave, got their provisions together, and marched far up the rocky canyon to the source of the river. And there they are. They're going to do some work. Take a look at Juan del Oso. He's really strong. He lifts the tree trunks, and Juan Mudacerros is really good with the shovel, and the other one is really good at moving the water, and they're making a presa. They're making a dam. After building a fire, dancing the run-tun-tun, and eating plenty of esquite and venison jerky, Oso Grande, Juan del Oso, Mudacerros, and Mudarrios made a presa high up on the rocky canyon, a structure woven of trees and boulders to capture the flow of the river and make a deep pond. With a brandy bottle half full of water, Mudarrios carefully chose the route for the new Acequia to climb up along the ridge, letting the rest of the flow crash down to the river below. Mudacerros removed the large rocks and lined the new Acequia with cobbles. Juan del Oso and his father pulled up the trees in the way, and they wove them like a huge basket into the dam. They all worked together to achieve what neither could have accomplished alone. At just the right point on the ridge above the forest and the valley, the newly routed water cascaded down the mountainside como un salto, like a waterfall, with a ruffling sound like a flock of crows. Juan del Oso left his father and friends in the forest and ran to the house of his mom and grandpa to rejoin them and tell them the good news. So this is how they did it. They just took a bottle and used the bottle as a level to see how to make the water go uphill and how to make the water go from the Rio Grande watershed into the Mora watershed, which goes to the Canadian River, which goes to the Missouri River, which goes to the Mississippi River, and to the Gulf of Mexico. So they took it out of the Rio Grande and they put it into the Mississippi. The same afternoon, all the people in the village below joyfully shouted, "Ahí viene el agua! Ahí viene la puntera!" And look, here are the people of Mora. You can actually tell who they are. There's Harold Trujillo. There's Lorraine. Gosh, what's her last name? Hey, there's Antonio Medina. These are the people of Mora, and that's the waterfall Acequia of Chacon. So they came out, they hugged each other, and they lifted their wooden hose into the air. They could not believe their eyes. They could not believe their eyes. In the following weeks, months, and years, the people worked together to plan their new life in the valley. First, they leveled the upper pastures and fields with the help of the Juanes. They cleared a big swath of land that can still be seen from the highway as one drives from Holman to Holman from Peñasco. They carefully routed the Acequia to give all of the families all the water they needed. Up above and down below, more wheat was planted. In the highest cultivated plots, they planted haba beans, cabbage, peas, potatoes, turnips, and beets, habas, frijoles, coles, chícharos, alverjones, papas, nabos, y what's the word for beets? Not remolacha, betabeles in New Mexico. Further down, there were the frijoles pinto, the corn, maíz, the squashes, calabacitas, and the kitchen gardens of rabanitos, the radishes, carrots, zanahorias, herbs, and greens. Near the river, They planted orchards of manzanas, peras, membrillos, albarcoques, cerezas, y what's the word for plums? Ciruelas. So apricots and cherries and apples, all the beautiful fruit of the Mora Valley. The only crops that could not grow up that high were chile and melones and tomatoes, no tomatoes. These they could only get by trading with the people from the valleys west of the Jicarita. To this day, the desire for chile still unites the people of both sides of the mountains. They go over there to Dixon to get their chile, to Embudo. Finally, the young strong men ended their exile and joined the community again. Oso Grande still keeps his distance at the edges of the forest. People never forgot what the Juanes accomplished, how the mountains were moved and the rivers changed courses so la gente could live and prosper. Around wood stoves and kitchen tables, the people still remind their children and grandchildren of the feats of Juan del Oso and his outcast friends and how righteous hard work can be. Strength without purpose can lead to destruction. Strength channeled like the water in the acequia brings life to all. La fuerza sin un propósito puede llevar a la destrucción, pero la fuerte canalizada como el agua en una acequia trae vida a todos. Every spring, the winter's ice is broken on the acequia del Rito Negro, la acequia de la Sierra, and la acequia del Rito Griego y la Sierra, the acequias of Juan del Oso, so the water can flow again to the beautiful valleys of Mora. And here's the last scene. And what do you see in the last scene? Here's the kids. Here's an old guy with gray hair who kind of looks like Juan del Oso. And there's Juan del Oso, or at least the ghost of Juan del Oso. Anyway, we know that this is a story. This is a story. This is not history. The bears didn't make the acequias in the Mora Valley. People did. And I have the list of their names. See if you can recognize the names. Maybe one of these names is your name. Let's do the list. Holguín, Martínez, Durán, Romero, Arellano, Aveita, Lucero, Archuleta, Borrego. Lift your hands if you hear your name called. Cruz, González, Luján, Melendez, Lara, Madrid. That's like my name. Suazo, Tapia, Garcia, Medina, Trujillo, Valdez, Gallegos, Mascareñas, Gandert, Montaño, Martín, Medina, Ortega, Páez, Pacheco, Sanchez, Salazar, Vigil, and that's the short list. That's who made the acequias of Mora. And if you're from Mora, if you're from Las Vegas, you will recognize these names. And now you know the story of Juan del Oso. It's your story. A lot of people forgot it, but I'm so glad to get to tell it to you again. My name's Enrique Lamadrid. Gusto en conocerles. Y un adiós también de Oso Grande. Oh, adiós, adiós. So, Oso Grande les dice adiós también. Bueno, bye.